It is almost unanimous that those who saw the 1975 Southridge Sectional Championship game between Forest Park and Jasper call it the greatest game ever played in that historic sectional. Who can forget Terry Tucker's tip-in to send the game into overtime when it looked like the Wildcats might go down to defeat? In this Jasper Today exclusive, Coach Ken Schultheis sits down and relives the memories of that game with Coach Ed Schultheis.
Well, we're back in a familiar surrounding for you, Coach. And it's just as easy to call you Coach as it is my dad. But we've spent a lot of years around Jasper basketball. And today we're back in the Cabby O'Neill gym, which we both have commented on is such a beautiful gym. And Coach, before we get in and talk about that 75 triple overtime thriller sectional, just some comments on what you can see here with what they've done with the Cabby O'Neill gym.
Well, the gym today is more complete than it was when we coached here. Remodeling it, putting it back where it was, I guess, the day it opened. And I'm just marveled at the fact it's so beautiful. And it would have been a shame had torn it down.
Yeah, and we always want to give credit to Rick Bagley and Terry Tucker and Kevin Messmer and a number of the people that stepped up. And of course yourself and members of our family stepped up to help keep the Cabby relevant in today, and it is beautiful. There's not a better floor with better lighting around Southern Indiana. You've got Memorial Gymnasium over in Southridge, but this is quite a facility, and I think Cabby is very proud with that grin looking down on it.
I would think Cabby very happy that they didn't eliminate this place. After all, this Cabby O'Neill gym. But Cabby was something special. There's not too many guys around that fits his mold. But from day one, 1959, when he gave me a call, I always had an inkling, maybe this is where I'd like to be. Even when I was in college, because I thought it was a good basketball town, and it had very much successful season, year in and year out. And I didn't hesitate when Cabby called me to come up and talk to me about the job.
Well, you know, and there's so much in your career, and just Jasper basketball in general, and but we're going to concentrate and focus a little bit on the 75 sectional. It was the 5th straight sectional of your string of 5 over at Southridge or Memorial Gymnasium, and it was voted by fans several years back as the 2nd biggest game ever played there, behind a game that I was involved in.
Who voted the first one?
Well, I tell you what, I'd gladly trade places with you since we were on the losing end with Scott Rowland. I think it probably because of the great individual performance by Scott in that loss. But from my standpoint, as a young boy, your son, watching the game, having played over there as well and coached, I think the triple overtime against Forest Park was the greatest game played over at Southridge, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, Coach. And I know it was back a long time ago, 30 plus years ago, but it still resonates with many, many people in DuBois County, whether they played in the game, whether they were in the gym witnessing it, whether they were listening to the call on the radio by Bob Simmers, or whether they left the gym early, as you know a number of people that did, who came back later and said, we couldn't get back in to see the ending, but it was still a great game. But let's just talk a little bit about it. You had a junior laden team that had, from most people's perspective, overachieved that year. You had Brad Vogler, of course, one of the top players in Southern Indiana. My brother and your son Jim, who was just a stalwart workhorse for you at the other guard. You had a good player in Danny Leidenbach, Mike Licklider, Terry Tucker, who becomes Mr. Clutch in that game, but was a solid, not just a contributor, but a senior leader the whole year.
And named Jeff Bobble.
You had Jeff Bobble, who came on and hit a big free throw in that game, who was just a big, strong, hard-working player
Mike
for you.
Mike Licklider had to come in, take Danny's place because he fouled out.
And you were going up against a really good basketball team.
Excellent team.
In Forest Park. The Rangers, of course, were consolidated. Coach Peacock, I believe, was in charge at that time. They had a nice team with Rick Wilgus, who coaches at Memorial now. Jim Maley, one of the great athletes to come out of Du Bois County. Becker, tremendous shooter.
Maybe the second best showing of Scott Rowland.
Tremendous
47.
shooter.
I think he had 30s plus.
Yeah.
That was a 2-point shot in those days.
Dan Luba, who's a great jumper and rebounder, who's passed away now. Lampkin. They had an outstanding team. Had either team won that night, it would have been a great representative in the Washington Regional. But going into that game, championship game, we know what Southridge Sectional's like, just tremendous. But you've won 4 in a row. You've got a junior laden squad. Of course, Jasper's always got the monkey on the back over there. They should win. Try to think back, just some of your thoughts going into that championship game.
Well, I think we really respected Forest Park because they had an outstanding season. Plus, they had some outstanding ball players. But to think that was going to be a triple overtime, never expected that. To think we would be behind with 4 points with 13 seconds to go and win the game, we never dreamed of that. And plus, fans, as you had mentioned earlier, left. And one of them was Alvin Rexer, who told me the story, and Mr. Whitty. They both left early and tried to get back in because they got the car and we had tied it up. But just one story after another. But going back, I think we had a timeout real late. We're down 4 with 13 seconds to go. And I asked each player to make a certain move for the jump ball in those days. And Brad got it, dropped, step, turn, put in. We called another timeout. Well, from that point on, Jeff Bobo was in there too. He had to make 2 foul shots to get us in the overtime. From that time on, Leubenhuizen told Tucker, when's this thing going to get over with after the 3rd overtime? These are little comments that I heard later. And then when we look at it, Danny Leinenbach's not even in the triple overtime. And we got to have him.
Yeah.
Rick Wilgus never played in the triple overtime because he fouled out. And just one thing after another took place. Finally, Leubenhuizen said at the end, he's telling Tucker, my knees are about to give out. Somebody win this game. Now, whether that was the exact words, I don't know. But it was just those kind of comments. And the next day, I run into a very good, close friend of mine coming out of church, feeling pretty chirpy because we were fortunate. And we were fortunate. He says, I kind of felt sorry for Forest Park. And I turned to him. I said, I did. And kept on walking. But we had a lot of respect for Forest Park and Jim Peacock. He lost a tough game when we won.
You know, Coach, you brought up earlier about that, the last 13 seconds. And we're down for Jasper's down 4. And, you know, it looks like it's over. Let's face it. I got to tell you, as your son at the time, 6th grader, I went into the dressing room where I always used to go when things got tough, made my little cross out of tape, and prayed that the right things could happen for the team. But so I really didn't get to witness that part of it, although I saw it many times on tape, which we were fortunate to salvage that. A lot of sectional final games can't be found anymore. But you're at that point, you're down 4. Forest Park is feeling like this is ours. Jasper, the crowd has really gotten quiet. You know how Jasper controlled that crowd. People walked out, as you said. The great citizen of Jasper, Alvin Rux, a great businessman. A number of other people who at least were honest and told you at the end that they did walk out. But we're in the jump ball era. And, you know, we're not in the possession era. Now we see a jump ball once in a while. But back then, if there was a tied-up ball, it was a jump ball. There was no possession era. And that's what happens. We get a jump ball. We're down 4. And Leubenhuizen, who's a tremendous jumper.
And taller than our jumper.
Yeah. Quick. He's quick. He jumps well. Strong. Good guy. Again, he has passed away, and we certainly miss him. He left us way too young. But he has a chance to change this game one way or the other in the jump ball. And we've talked about it from the standpoint of coaches. if our player's doing the jump ball, we want him to hit the ball away from the opponent's basket. And he actually does get the jump ball.
Right. He got the tip. I called timeout, told each we were going to rotate like the clock movement, opposite clock movement. But everybody was listening. I said, no, we got to come up with the jump ball, so we got to gamble a little bit. He hits it. Brad's quick enough to grab it, take a drop step, lay it in, boom, boom, timeout.
And at that point, we're down two.
We're down two, and
things fall right into your hands, Coach. The rotation works. Dan hits it, but he kind of hits it not away from the basket, more towards the basket, ends up in our hands, and it's a layup. We've got a quick timeout, which you've got to get, and now you're in the huddle with your five, Wildcat five, and literally, this is it. I mean, you either got to come up with this ball somehow. Talk about that timeout.
Well, we put a man on each of the Forest Park players, but I told Jim, my son and brother, to back off and bait the ball to go. Malin was going to throw it in, and Becker was their superstar at that time. I said, make sure that he's going to throw it to Becker, but you lay off just enough that he thinks he's open. He lofted the ball a little bit more than we like to think that you should on an out-of-bounds. Jim got in front of it, intercepted, dribbled to the top of the key, took the shot, missed the shot. Tucker, Terry, was there to put it back up. It was kind of a tip. People questioned it, but they didn't call it a tip. Back now, there's another rule. You had to have control of the ball. The tip would not have counted. And they tried to come back. The referee said, no, it's controlled ball. And we got tied up. We're still not in the driver's seat.
But you've got more basketball to play. And I remember coming out just as Jim Schultheis stole the ball. And the great thing about that was your guys, everybody had to be paying attention in that huddle. The decoy had to be perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Jim had to decoys if he was going in a different direction and then return back. And Jim Schultheis, he was a pretty good jumper. He wasn't.
Long arm.
Yeah, he had long arms and he jumped well. Just a hard worker. He plays it just perfect, and I can still see him shooting that shot. And he almost had to shoot it a brick. He almost had to shoot a brick. Otherwise, if it hits the back of the rim, it flies out. But he shoots it almost so poorly that it kind of hits as a brick and rolls over into Terry, who's able to control it just enough in his hand and tip it in. And that's another rule that people forget about. You just couldn't flick it up there and it counted. So that's an amazing 13 seconds that really changed the history of the Southridge Sectional and turned that game into what many believe the first or second greatest game. So you're tied up and you're going into the overtime. Take us through just a little bit. Of course, Jasper ends up winning it. Just talk a little bit about
Well,
that.
the first overtime, they score first. We tied up. Now you're playing a little cat and mouse. And I don't remember how many shots were taken. Maybe one or two each end. Second overtime, they get the lead again. We tie it up. We're playing a little back and forth, not much scoring. Third overtime, if I'm not mistaken, they scored again. We tied it and finally went ahead of them. Now we're playing the cat and mouse game. So it got to that point where they had to foul us, and I think we went up by 2-3. And but it wasn't quite that easy, you know.
And that was a time also defensively where the officials didn't allow a lot of physical contact. So you're in these overtimes and teams are able to really take the air out of the basketball, so to speak. We coined the phrase years ago, butcher ball, where you could spread the floor and you didn't get the physical, you weren't allowed to be as physical as you are today. So when somebody got the lead, you had to be moving your feet, getting into passing lanes and blocking out, because your opportunity to get that ball back and tie the game or get a lead, it was even more difficult at times.
Yeah, the rules have changed quite a bit since then. But, you know, the three-point play wasn't in anymore. You had to be a little bit lucky. Well, anytime you get an overtime, you got to be a little bit lucky, because you'll hit a shot. Some guy will hit a shot. But we were always the catch-up team. It looked like we're not going to make it. It's just one of those games. They're going to finally get us. The fans of Forest Park, to this day I can remember them. They were jumping 2 and 3 feet high. I mean, they had it won.
Yeah.
And then we got our home fans leaving thinking it's over with. Alvin Ruckstrom and Whitty and some of his friends. But I had as many as 200 people that told me they never saw the triple overtime. They left the game, did not get a pass out, got to their cars, we tied it up, so they wanted to come back and watch it, and they wouldn't let them back in.
And the great thing about that is because as they were walking out the door, Ed Schultheis probably wasn't very smart, but then once they found out we won, you got pretty smart at that point.
Yeah. You get always smarter if you win.
You know, Coach, that game was just one of many big, exciting games at the Southward Sectional in the one-class system. But you tell a little bit of a tidbit. You know, you and I over the years we've talked about, and other fans I know and coaches, people that step up at sectional time, at tourney time, come through in ways that they didn't all year. And you have that with Jeff Bob. Yeah. Jeff was an outstanding football player, great, really, really good athlete, good person as well.
Physical on the basketball.
And did a nice job for you, but he was a role player who couldn't shoot the ball very well, and especially free throws. But tournament time, everybody gets a little bit better. Good players, clutch players, good athletes. They come up. Jeff did that for you in that.
Well, on the time, one of the timeouts, we had to hit him. Jeff scheduled to shoot 2. And all my whole talk in the huddle was, after Bible hits these 2 foul shots, we have to do this, this, this. We've got to do this because it's right there. So, bang, he hits the first one. All right, things look pretty good. He hits the second, but that wasn't all. After the game, after the triple overtime's over with, he comes up to me, and he's on the radio, if I'm not mistaken, with Bob Simmers, and says, "It's the first time I've ever hit 2 foul shots in a row in my life."
But
that was coming out of his mind. He'll laugh about it to this day.
And I think that's the thing that's always exciting about March and Hoosier Hysteria or college basketball. Big players step up. People that you don't think of making a shot make it, or the defensive play. And on the other side, the flip side, the real clutch players step up and play great games. As Tommy Berger hit the baseline shot for you to win a sectional over Southridge, you had an outstanding team. So, and we can talk about, and I'm sure we will, but we can talk about all those maybe in another segment. But it's important for people to understand a little bit about that triple overtime. It truly is one of the great games of the Southridge Sectional. Unfortunately, for posterity reasons, we do have it, the footage, we do have the game on film and switch to DVD, and the people have a chance to relive that. You and I both know that we went through a period of the IHSAA where they didn't tape sectional games. They wouldn't allow it.
It had to be a sellout, and you could only tape the final game.
The final game.
And what a mess they messed up.
All those great historical moments in individual games.
Not only in Jasper, but everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah, everywhere. Well, Coach, it's been great visiting about the triple overtime of 1975. It was a great victory, and for people who were there, it seems like yesterday. For people who played in it, they can never forget it. And, we're 30 plus years later, and people are still talking about it. Again, congratulations on one of the greatest games of the Southern Section.
Well, thank you, Coach. Thank you, Mr. Milligan, for having me.